Why is it that the moment you stop chasing someone, they suddenly can't stop thinking about you? If you've ever gone no contact with someone who seemed completely indifferent to your presence, you might have noticed something strange happen. But here's what most people don't realize about why this works so powerfully. And by the end of this, you'll understand the 3 psychological triggers that make no contact absolutely irresistible to her mind. The phone calls start coming. The texts begin flowing. Suddenly, the person who barely acknowledged your existence is reaching out with an urgency that feels almost desperate. But this isn't the real reason she becomes obsessed. The real reason is much darker, and it has to do with how her brain processes your disappearance. When you were constantly available, constantly reaching out, constantly trying to prove your worth, you unknowingly activated what psychologists call the familiarity trap. Your attention became as predictable as her morning coffee. But here's the thing about predictable things. They trigger a specific response in the female brain that most men never understand. Think about it this way. When something is always there, always accessible, always guaranteed, the human brain doesn't just ignore it. It actually develops what scientists call habituation response. This is crucial to understand because without grasping this concept, everything else I'm about to tell you won't make sense. Her brain literally rewires itself to expect your attention. It becomes neurologically dependent on your validation. But dependency and desire are completely different things. She needed your attention, but she didn't want it. And this is where most men get it completely wrong. But the moment you vanish, something fascinating happens in her mind that triggers the first psychological mechanism. The brain that once dismissed your attention suddenly experiences what neurologists call pattern interrupt shock. The predictable pattern breaks. The guaranteed source of validation disappears. And in that moment, her mind shifts into a completely different operating mode. This is the scarcity activation phase, and it's only the beginning. Because what happens next is where things get really interesting. And it explains why some women become completely obsessed while others just move on. The difference lies in understanding the second trigger. Here's what's happening in her psychology during those first few days of silence, and this is where most people think the story ends, but it's actually where the real psychology begins. Her brain, accustomed to your regular contact, starts experiencing what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement withdrawal. It's the exact same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. When a reward that was once predictable suddenly becomes unpredictable or absent, the brain doesn't just give up, it doubles down. It becomes obsessed with understanding why the pattern changed. But this is still just the surface level of what's really happening. She starts replaying your last conversations, analyzing every word, every gesture, every moment for clues about what went wrong. The mind that once took your attention for granted now can't stop wondering where it went. But here's what she doesn't realize is happening in her subconscious mind. And this is the key to the second trigger. Your absence forces her to confront something she's been avoiding this entire time. When you were always there, always responding, always available, she never had to actually feel her real emotions about you. Your constant presence was actually preventing her from experiencing genuine attraction. Now, in the silence, she's forced to feel the full weight of your absence. And this is where the obsession truly begins to take hold. But it's not just about missing your attention. There's something much deeper happening that most people completely miss. The space you occupied in her daily routine becomes glaringly obvious. The emotional support you provided, the attention you gave, the validation you offered, all of it becomes magnified through its absence. But here's the crucial part that determines whether she becomes obsessed or just moves on entirely. She begins to realize what she had, precisely because she no longer has it. This realization triggers what psychologists call loss aversion, which is exponentially more powerful than attraction itself. People will fight harder to avoid losing something they have than to gain something they want. But this only works if the third psychological trigger is activated, and this is the most important one. Without this, everything else I've told you is completely useless. The human mind has a powerful need for closure, for understanding, for resolution. But here's the key. You can't just disappear and hope for the best. When you disappear without explanation, without the typical back and forth of relationship drama, you create what psychologists call an open loop in her mind. Her brain becomes consumed with the need to close that loop. But the loop has to be opened correctly, or her brain will simply close it by deciding you weren't worth her time anyway. This is why timing matters. This is why your last interaction matters. This is why understanding her specific attachment style matters, because the wrong kind of no contact will actually push her away permanently. while the right kind creates genuine obsession. Every day that passes without contact adds weight to this psychological pressure, but only if you've properly activated all three triggers. She starts checking your social media obsessively, looking for clues about your state of mind. She begins crafting messages she never sends, practicing conversations she hopes to have. But here's what makes this so powerful, and why understanding these three triggers changes everything. Your absence doesn't just make her miss you, it makes her idealize you. When someone is gone, we don't remember their flaws. We don't focus on the reasons things didn't work. Instead, our minds paint an idealized picture of what we've lost. Every good memory becomes magnified. Every positive trait becomes exaggerated. Every moment of connection becomes precious. This idealization process is what transforms simple missing into genuine obsession. But without understanding how to properly implement these three psychological triggers, no contact becomes just another manipulation tactic that backfires. She's not just thinking about the real you, she's thinking about the perfect version of you that her mind has created in your absence. And that perfect version is far more compelling than the available, predictable version ever was. The irony is profound. By stepping away, by refusing to chase, by choosing your own peace over her attention, you've accomplished what all your previous efforts couldn't. You've made yourself valuable. You've created genuine desire where there was once only indifference or mild interest. But this only works when you understand the deeper psychology behind why her brain responds this way to your absence. This doesn't mean no contact is about playing games or using psychology to control someone. It's about recognizing your own worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve. It's about understanding that your presence should be a gift, not a guarantee. But there's a deeper truth here that goes beyond just romantic dynamics, and this connects to why these three triggers work in every area of your life. Friends who take you for granted suddenly value your friendship when you're not always available. Family members who dismiss your efforts suddenly appreciate you when you stop trying so hard. The lesson isn't that you should manipulate people by withdrawing your presence. The lesson is that your presence should have value, and value is created through understanding these psychological triggers, not through constant availability. No contact works because it forces both of you to confront the reality of the relationship without the comfortable patterns that kept it stagnant. It creates space for genuine feelings to emerge instead of just comfortable familiarity. It allows attraction to build instead of being suffocated by constant contact. When she finally does reach out, and if you've properly activated these three triggers, she absolutely will, you'll notice something different in her energy. There will be an urgency that wasn't there before, a genuine interest that replaced the polite responses. But here's the most important part that determines your success. How you respond when she reaches out will determine whether this becomes a genuine reconnection or just another cycle of the same old patterns. But remember this, your worth isn't determined by how much attention you give someone. Your value isn't measured by how available you are. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to miss you, to realize what they had, to understand that your presence in their life was a choice. No contact makes her obsessed because it transforms you from someone who needs her validation into someone whose validation she needs. And that shift in dynamic, when done correctly, using these three psychological triggers, changes everything.